When a woman vanished, no one thought that they would be searching for her to put her in handcuffs. But this woman wasn't completely gone. Online, she was very much active, and nothing was adding up. Threats and stalker behavior began, but not towards this missing person. From her. But why couldn't she be found? Was this even her behind the screen? Was she even still alive? You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke Mckenna, but today's case is about the cyber stalker. There was also a missing woman, and it's quite insane. So I'm very excited to be bringing this to you today. I also want to mention that I have merch for ODDtober. We are doing the strangest cases this month, all month long, on this channel, but I wanted to bring you some merch as well, and this time I decided that I wanted to use the phrase that I say at the end of every video, which is speak up, your voice is powerful enough. I've created t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, and also a tote bag, and I absolutely love the design. And I do want to mention that 100% of the proceeds will be going to an amazing human and actually a kidnapping survivor who is creating a project which is basically self-care for survivors. There are these bags that she's going to be filling with everything that helps with her journey to hopefully help other survivors as well. I completely believe in this project and giving back to especially those who have been through so much and who want to make the world a better place. So if you would like to get some merch or just buy something in order to donate the money to her, I will have that link down below. Now let's get back to the story. So it was 2012 in Nebraska, and Dave Krupa was actually living in Omaha and working as a mechanic. He was born on October 8th of 1976 to Tom and Trish, and he had two younger brothers named Adam and Max. Now this whole family was super hardworking, very religious, very reliable, and after high school, Dave actually spent 2 years in the National Guard while also simultaneously studying for automotive engineering, which is why he would become a mechanic later on. He was just very into cars and working on them, and he at this point was not very religious. He'd kind of taken a step back from that. But at his first job, he would actually meet who would become the mother of his two children. This was a woman named Amy Flora. And the two never really got married because Dave was not one who wanted that sort of commitment, but they did pretty much have an exclusive relationship, it appeared, for about 12 years before deciding to split. Now they did co-parent, and Dave took the kids occasionally, but Amy was more of the, parent that had them the most. And Dave spent most of his time at his automotive repair shop that he was working at this time, and he was also dating a new woman that he had found on a dating app called Plenty of Fish. He was just looking for basically companionship, but he wasn't in the market for a serious girlfriend. And this is when he would meet a woman named Shayna Liz Goliar. Now, Liz was actually what she went by. Her middle name was Elizabeth, so she went by Liz, and they really hit it off quickly, and Liz had two children of her own as well. She also owned a housekeeping business, so they were both, full-grown adults that were doing their own thing, that wanted to come together occasionally and have some fun together. And she was more than okay and very aware that Dave was not a commitment kind of man and enjoyed seeing more than one woman. So in October of 2012, the 37-year-old single mother, who was Cari Farver, walked into Dave's repair shop. Dave was interested from the very beginning. Cari had gone needing maintenance for her Ford Explorer, and so she was really just going in there to get her car fixed, but she ended up leaving with a new boyfriend. Now, it wasn't that quickly, but Cari and Dave were both said to immediately feel the sparks, but Dave thought it would be unprofessional to ask her for her number or ask her out, so he kind of took a step back and didn't do anything when they initially met. However, he did come across Cari's profile on an online dating website as well, and that is when they officially started dating. Their first date was on October 29th at a local Applebee's, and they loved spending time together. They were both on the exact same page with relationships, nothing too serious, because they did both have kids. You see, Cari had about a 15-year-old son named Max. Now, Cari had just recently moved to Omaha, but it was actually back to this area. You see, she had been through quite a bit during her 20s after having her son, and it was basically a very rough mental health journey, but it was on the mend. You see, after giving birth to her son, she began struggling with depression and anxiety, and so she ended up going to some doctors to get some help, and after further evaluation, they actually diagnosed her with bipolar disorder and put her on medications that would help her. Now, at this point, Cari was on her medication. She was taking it consistently, and she was at a very good place in her life. She was working as a computer programmer at a very established place, and she was really lighting up every room she walked in because she was so happy at the time that she would vanish. You see, on November 13th of that same year, so not even really a month since she'd started dating Dave, Cari disappeared from the world. Her car, as well as some of her belongings, were gone, and her casual boyfriend, Dave, claimed that she had actually left his home in Omaha, Nebraska, which was around 40 minutes away from where she actually lived in Iowa, but she had been staying the night at his house, so she had left there earlier that morning, or so he believed. You see, Dave claimed that Cari was staying with him for about a week because she had this work project that was keeping her up early mornings, late nights, and she was actually closer to work when she stayed with Dave. So he said, yes, of course, you can just stay over if it makes your job easier. And so she didn't always do this, but at this point, that is what was happening. And whenever she stayed over, her son was actually with her mother and stepfather, so his grandparents. But Dave said that that morning, he actually was on his way to work first. He left around 6:20 a.m., gave her a kiss. She was actually already awake and working on her laptop in basically like the kitchen and living room. She was up and awake. Now, he believed that she was going to be going to work shortly after. That's what her daily routine was. And she appeared to be up and ready for the day. So that's where he believed she had gone. But Cari's employer at West Corporation claimed that she did call in that morning to talk to somebody about the project. It was around 6:15, so about 5 minutes before Dave actually left. And then she never showed up for work, which was not like her at all. She didn't call them, and they tried calling her several times, and she wasn't answering. Now, Dave then would admit that Cari had been very upset with him, because shortly after he left, he actually started getting a text from Cari that was asking to move in full time with him. He immediately thought this was strange because this was not something that Cari wanted or he wanted, and they were both thought to be on the same page. So he immediately said, no, this isn't happening. And so after this, she began to get very angry with him. And he said that that's possibly why she didn't show up to work, because she was angry at him. She was having a bad day. She just wasn't seeming like herself to Dave. Now, Cari wasn't immediately reported missing, however, because her mother, who was Nancy Rainey, and her 15-year-old son, Max, had spoken to her a few times about why she suddenly disappeared and where she had gone. You see, Cari had told her family that she had actually found a new job in Kansas, and she was going to go check it out before taking Max all the way there, and so she just wanted to see if it would be a good fit. Another text, though, came in later saying that she had actually checked herself into a mental hospital, that she wasn't doing very well. 3 days later, she still hadn't returned home, and her family began to realize that they weren't actually speaking to Cari. It was never over the phone. They never heard her voice. It was always over text. She then began to stop responding once they were asking her further questions about what was really going on. But the kicker here was on November 16th, when Cari didn't show up to her half-brother's wedding, whom she was very close to, and that's when it solidified to the whole family that something was wrong. She also had stopped visiting her father, who had stomach cancer at the time and did not have very long to live, and Cari was known to always be visiting him to make sure she got time, the little time she had left, with her father. She was officially reported missing to the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office, and Cari's very sick father was also kept in the dark at this time because they didn't want to make it worse for him to know that his daughter was missing. But he began asking questions when she wasn't showing up, and he wanted to see her, and they were saying she couldn't come. They didn't even know yet that Cari had actually texted her employer. This was on November 15th when Cari had sent a message, which was just a text, very unprofessional, resigning from her position. Investigators then found that credit card reports of her cards had showed that she had actually made purchases after she vanished. This was for $168 and $226 at different locations, kind of the discount stores. But one thing that the cashiers knew that she bought was a black and white floral pattern shower curtain, which seemed extremely odd. And this was actually in Omaha, Nebraska, where she vanished, but not where she lived. However, although the investigation was just getting started at this point, it would kind of halt because Nancy would tell investigators that her daughter was diagnosed with bipolar, and they began to claim that she just had a manic episode somewhere, she was off her meds, and when she came to, she would return. Also the fact that she was an adult and could make her own decisions, and there were texts saying that she was going to come back, that she'd basically left on her own free will. Now, with this bipolar statement, it should have given them more of an obligation to find her because she was struggling with her own mind, but it did the opposite. However, they did tell the family that until they spoke personally with Cari, they would not close this case. But when it became clear that that was not happening anytime soon, the investigation did continue on. Now, Cari's mother, Nancy, then got another message over Facebook from an account with Cari's name on it, but Nancy was saying, I'm not going to believe that this is you unless you call me and I hear your voice. Cari then messaged back saying that she would call her, but after that she was done, that she was grateful that they were taking care of Max, but she was done with all of the cop stuff. She said that she was not 10 years old, that she could leave and move on with someone new. But Cari would go on to miss her own birthday, her son's birthday, and her father's funeral after the cancer had taken him. And at that point, with the funeral when she didn't show, everyone knew that there was something that needed to be done because Cari was either not in her right mind at all or something horrific had happened to her. She did post on Facebook, though, apologizing for not being at that funeral, and then later she would post that Dave Krupa had proposed to her and she had said yes. Now, of course, the partner of a missing person is one of the first suspects that is looked into. But once they spoke to Dave, they began to get even more confused because Dave was saying he never proposed. He was not even close to that. He didn't like the idea of marriage, and it began to show them the text that Cari had broken up with him. And investigators had actually found even more oddities in this case because about 4 to 5 days prior to Cari's disappearance, she was at home in Iowa, in Macedonia, Iowa is where she lived, and her car, the Ford Explorer, had been vandalized with some silver spray paint in her driveway. She even made a Facebook video about this, and she was saying that in a joking manner that somebody didn't believe that the color of her car was right and that they were quite the artist. And through that video, you could see that she was very level-headed. She was quite relaxed, quite non-confrontational, kind of making this a joke, even though this really could have ruined her car.
Apparently somebody here in the whopping metropolis of Macedonia, Iowa, decided Max's Explorer was not the right color. We're gonna go see if we can fix that. Somebody thought they were quite the artist.
And with this behavior, it made it even more strange for what was about to occur. The day prior, she had gone to work that whole day as usual. She left around 8 to 9 p.m. with a coworker friend, and she was going to Dave's apartment. And then, that next morning, she was up early, ready to go to work, but she never got there, and then she subsequently vanished off the face of the earth. And so with Cari being on her laptop around the same time that she vanished, her computer was examined because it was found. Now, investigators found that after Dave left around 6:39 a.m., Cari had actually logged on to Facebook, but she logged out around 3 minutes later. However, that wasn't the last time her computer would be used that day, even though there was no record of her even being there past the time, when Dave was there. because even though no one had seen her that day, 3 hours later, her computer was opened again, and at 9:45 a.m. Facebook was logged into, and then one person was unfriended. That person was Dave Krupa. At the same time, she also commented on that Facebook video that she had posted of the vandalism of her car, saying that it turned out to just be kids. And then her phone records were obtained, and 15 minutes after that, Cari had texted Dave and asked if they could live together. And when he immediately said no, that's when Cari broke up with him. But she was extremely angry in this text. You could tell even through just words on a screen. She said, "Fine, I don't ever want to see you again. Go away. I'm dating somebody else. I hate you." So Dave's story at this point was corroborated, and Dave said he was almost adamant that this was not like Cari, because that is the whole reason he was almost obsessed with her. He adored her. So they attempted to trace these texts sent after her disappearance, and that is when it was found to be in Omaha, Nebraska, but that location that it was found at, no cell phone was found, and she, of course, wasn't found there either. But during the search for this missing woman, she did not go quiet. For a missing woman, she was extremely active on social media. She was making posts, she was sending messages, she was talking to friends and family. And when Cari was showing up online, it wasn't just on Facebook. She also had made multiple different dating profiles on different sites. But this is when another investigation would begin, because not only did they have this missing persons case, but this missing person was being accused of harassment. Now, Dave Krupa and his other girlfriend, Liz Goliar, the girl that he was simultaneously dating in his open relationship, they had gone to police. They began to show investigators very scary, threatening texts and emails from Cari on their phones and also emails that they had gotten. Investigators did not know who was the victim after reading these. They were from 30 different numbers, 30 different emails. And Dave was saying that really the bulk of the messages he would get per day would be about 50 to 60 a day. But Cari appeared in these messages to be very upset with Dave and Liz for being together at this time and calling Liz the W word. But all of these messages had very strong grammatical errors. Her mother said that that could not have been Cari, but this was also chalked up to some sort of mental breakdown or mania that she could have been going through. Now, the initial reports about this harassment would escalate to stalking when Dave began to get texts about exactly what he was doing, telling him that Cari was watching him. He was once sitting in his couch watching TV, and she said, "I can see you sitting there watching this show wearing this color shirt." 10 days after Cari's disappearance, Liz would report vandalism on her property and stolen checks from her broken into garage. She believed that this was Cari, and she reported more vandalism 3 months after that. Because at 3 months, Cari still had not been found, and at this time, Dave then noticed a car parked near his apartment that appeared to look like Cari's. And so he ended up taking a photo of the license plate, sending it to investigators, and when they searched the car, they found it extremely clean as though it was wiped down, but they did find a fingerprint on the mint container in the center console, and it didn't belong to Cari. 5 months after that, Dave reported vandalism as well, with a message that was left on his garage that said basically that Liz was a W word. They said they weren't just assuming that it was Cari either, that they were getting texts and emails about it with her basically claiming to do so. However, they had still not caught her, they had not found her, and still half a year after she had vanished, no one had actually spoken to or seen Cari Farver. Investigators asked if they could download all of these messages, these threats from Dave and Liz's phones at this point, and once they did, everything seemed legit, and Dave said that Cari actually still had the key that he had given her, which was very concerning to him. Now, these shocking actions of Cari, or who everyone believed to be Cari, did not stop there because Dave had been sent a picture of a woman with dark hair tied up in the trunk of a car with duct tape over her mouth. It was too dark to see who the woman actually was, but the email said that it was Liz and that Cari had kidnapped her. This turned out to be a lie. And almost a year after she had vanished, on August 17th of 2013, Liz Golyar's home was set on fire. Now, she and her kids were not there because they were in the process of moving elsewhere, but her 4 animals, meaning her 2 dogs, a cat, and a snake, were all inside and were all burned to death. Investigators found 6 points of origin, meaning that it was arson, and Liz said that she knew that it was Cari, that she even received an email from her saying, "I hope you and your children burned to death." She then sent one to Dave saying, "I am not lying. I set that nasty W's house on fire. I hope the W and her kids die in it." She even allegedly created a fake obituary for Liz.
What I've seen so far, looking inside, it's pretty obvious this is an intentionally set fire.
The guy that I'm seeing, he has a girlfriend that he dated for 2 weeks, and she's been stalking me since November.
Do you know her name?
It's Cari. C-A-R-I. She has made threats towards me and my kids. She would kept texting me telling me she wanted to kill me and my kids. You would think they were married as much as she's stalking me. She won't leave me alone. She will not go away. I just wish she would go away.
Dave was also about to lose his job due to everything that was happening and all the energy that he was putting into finding Cari, but also making all of this stop. And at the same time, Cari was asking for the detectives to leave her alone and actually texting them this, the detectives. That is when Nancy would get a call, her mother, from Dave saying that he got information that Cari was at a homeless shelter in Omaha. So they went to search with investigators. It was Nancy and investigators, and no one was there. However, they then went to Dave and they said, "Why would you tell us this? You know, where was your source from?" And he had no idea what they were talking about. He said he had never called Nancy. Cari's son, Max, was extremely strong during this time, and he was fed up with all of the lies, all of the secrets, all of just the strange things that were going on. So he decided to message his mom on Facebook, and he said hi, and he got a response, "Hey, little man, how are you?" He said his mother never called him little man, but he said, "I have 3 questions. 1, what is my middle name? 2, what was our first boxer's name? 3, who was my best friend as a little kid?" He then got no response. Now in 2015, 3 years since Cari had vanished, detectives Ryan Avis and Jim Doty took over the investigation because they believed that Cari could be dead and could have been dead this entire time. They went back over the evidence that they had downloaded from Liz and Dave's cell phones, but they found that it was only a logistical download, meaning that any deleted data wasn't actually recovered. So it was just what they kept on their phones. However, they got a lucky break because Liz was actually in the police department right when they were looking through everything. And she was actually filing a harassment report, but not against Cari because that report had already been filled out and was being looked into. This time it was a report against Amy Flora, Dave's other ex-girlfriend. And while talking to Liz, they said, "Can we download the evidence that Amy is harassing you?" And she, of course, said yes. So they downloaded it off of her phone. She agreed. But what she didn't know was that they were going to do a different kind of download, meaning even the deleted data would be logged into evidence. Now, they went through all of this evidence, and that is when they found a strange photo on Liz's phone of Cari's car. This was taken a month before investigators were called down to Dave's apartment about the car that was just sitting there, and that's when they searched it. And prior to them being called to search the car for the first time, they believed that Cari had vanished with her car. So, with this picture being found a month prior, the car was processed once again. And that is when forensic scientists found that the fingerprint they had originally found was a match to Liz. But before this was found, Liz was not kept and questioned at the police department. She was let go because she was filing the harassment report. She was the victim in that case, and so she was let go after she allowed them to download the evidence on her phone. Did they find their killer? Well, they thought so until what happened the next day. The next day, she would be calling 911 from a park in Council Bluffs, Iowa, because she had been shot. Officers found her on the ground right outside of her car with a wound in her thigh. She was bleeding, and she said she was sitting on a bench when she was attacked, and that she basically did not know that this was going to happen. She had no idea why it happened, that this person had run off. Now, she did survive and was in the hospital, and when she was questioned, she had a few varying stories. But the main theme was that her shooter was Amy Flora. This was Dave's children's mother. And while being questioned, Liz had given her own theory on how this connected to Cari Farver's disappearance. She believed that Cari was already dead, and that basically Dave's ex-girlfriend Amy was pretending to be Cari after murdering her. She said that Amy had started sending harassing messages just like Cari was to Liz and Dave. So officers raced to Amy's house. They were pointing guns right at her and her 2-year-old son who was inside, and Amy was said to be very cooperative. She was denying any involvement in the shooting of Liz or killing Cari, and she had a car outside, but the officers touched it and it was cold to the touch, as though she had not driven it recently, which it would have been if she had shot Liz. And so Amy actually then began to claim that she was getting harassing messages from Cari saying that she was being watched and warning her to stay away from Dave. She said she found all of this very strange because she was not romantically involved whatsoever with Dave at this point. It was just to co-parent the kids. They did not have any sort of physical relationship at all. She was brought in for a polygraph test and she did fail. However, the police didn't believe she had any involvement and let her go. But investigators were becoming more and more suspicious of Liz, and instead of spooking her, they decided to trick her. Basically, they asked her down to the police department because they said they needed help in arresting Amy. This was actually in 2016, 4 years since Cari had vanished, and Cari had still not been seen. Now, police actually lied to Liz, saying that they found remains that they believed to be Cari's, and Liz was saying, Amy is still threatening me. It has to be her. So investigators said, look, if you can get Amy to confess to the murder over email, that would be so much help in this investigation. She said, so you want me to email her? And they said, that's on you if you would like to get in the middle of this. And not long after, she brought in emails of Amy admitting to murder and giving details. These emails were of Amy confessing to have stabbed Cari 3 times in her chest and her stomach in her car as she begged for her life and asked to talk to her family. And then she did not die from the stab wounds, so Amy watched as her life drained from her body. Then this email detailed that she wrapped her body in a tarp and burned her in the garbage. She said she cleaned up the car and began to pose as Cari to cover it up. Now, Amy had said in this email that she had done this so that Cari would leave Dave alone. And within this email was a description of Cari's tattoo that she had that was a yin-yang tattoo. The public had not been told about this tattoo. Liz was saying, it makes more sense that it's not Cari harassing us, that it's Amy, because Cari had only been with Dave for about 2 weeks, and Amy was the one, with kids with him, had this long relationship with him, and it would make more sense for her to be stalking Dave and his girlfriend Liz. So the forensic scientists went back out to the car that was said to be the crime scene, and they searched it for the 3rd time. And this time they did find blood. You see, this was under the seat covers, and they didn't think to even look there because they didn't think it was a crime scene. And it was in the passenger seat. Inside the foam was a large red stain. So could this confession be true? Could Amy be Cari's killer? Investigators were beginning to believe that these emails and the information inside of them were giving clues as to what happened to Cari, but they were suspicious of the actual sender. In fact, now that they had these emails, they began looking at the IP addresses, and most of the emails from Cari, they appeared to come from a home of a man named Todd Butterboss. Now, by this point, Liz and Dave were an on-again, off-again relationship, and Liz was actually living with her other boyfriend. They had been dating even longer than Liz and Dave. They had been together for a very long time. Todd believed that their relationship was monogamous. He paid her bills, let her live inside his home, and paid for her children as well. He believed that Dave was one of her ex-boyfriends who had turned into a friend, and that was all. But the digital trail from all of these emails were beginning to lead back to Liz Golyar every time, whether it be emails from Cari or Amy.
I've never been around her car. I've never even seen it.
She definitely was giving me the old evil eye. She was upset, you could tell, by being confronted.
For years and years, people have been sending emails under Cari's fictitious accounts. The IP addresses show up to whose house? Your house.
I haven't had internet at my house.
Are you going to sit in this chair and be remorseful? Or are you going to sit in this chair and be cold-blooded? Because right now, after 4 years, this family's been looking for answers. Why would you create all these emails?
I haven't created any emails.
All these have been coming from
No,
your
they're not.
house.
And I'm not going to be accused of something that I didn't do.
Now, Dave was slowly catching on to what was happening, and that is when investigators actually told him what they believed was going on with Liz. They then asked him to move in with Amy to protect her. What they didn't know yet was that while looking into Liz, she had actually placed herself in the middle of every relationship that Dave ever tried to have, and especially Cari and Dave's relationship. Even from the very beginning, you see, during their first date at that Applebee's, Dave's phone kept blowing up, and Liz was calling and texting, and he wasn't picking up. Finally, he had to ask her to stop, and she was very upset about this. She said, I am on a date. Please stop doing this. Now, the calls did stop at this point, but when Cari and Dave went back to Dave's apartment, they were upstairs, just hanging out when his buzzer started going off. It continuously just buzzing. And so Dave went downstairs and found Liz outside sobbing. And she was saying, I need to get my things from your apartment. And he was saying, I have somebody over right now. Can you wait? She was sobbing, saying, no, let me in. And so Dave actually went back upstairs and told Cari, I'm so sorry, I had to deal with my ex. And Cari was like, okay, that's fine. I'm going to go home and you can call me when all of this is over. Cari was very relaxed about it, according to Dave, and so she had to walk out of his apartment, and she passed Liz on the way out. Liz went up and grabbed her things, and then she was trying to stay over, and Dave asked her to leave, and then called Cari and went over to her house to hang out further. But that wasn't the only time that Liz was a part of this, and no one knew about it, because the day prior to Cari being reported missing, Cari's employer had gotten that text saying that she was resigning, but that wasn't all it said. It also said that the person filling her position was going to be a woman named Shayna Golyar. Shayna, or Liz, filled out the application and started that job the next day, taking over her position. Another text came in to her mother, Nancy, and Cari was telling her mother that she had basically sold the rest of her belongings, and she sent a photograph of a check that was to her from a woman named Shayna Golyar. It was for $5,000 for this antique bedroom set. And Cari was asking her mother, can you let this woman in to get the bedroom set? And her mother was very distraught at this point because this was actually an heirloom in their family and nobody would have sold it, including Cari. Nancy was done with these strange texts at this point. She started demanding to know what was going on with Cari. And then she was told by Cari that she was a controlling and a bad mother. And so Nancy ended up going to investigators because they were actually investigating at this point, and she told them, the photos she had been sent, the messages, and that's actually why her phone, Cari's phone, was traced, and, it pinged that location in Omaha where they didn't find anybody. But what I didn't tell you was that it was also not too far from Liz's home. Liz's live-in boyfriend, Todd, was also starting to get texts from Cari as well. Cari was saying that she was one of Liz's friends and asked Todd if he would be Liz's emergency contact. Todd asked Liz, do you know this person? Is this true? And Liz said, yeah, Cari's my friend. However, Liz never mentioned any sort of harassment or stalking from Cari or anything that was going on. Now, Liz had actually moved in with Todd because she was evicted from her home shortly before it caught on fire. So digital forensic scientists had found that in order to impersonate and become the online Cari, that she would have had to have spent 40 to 50 hours a week doing so. Basically a full-time job. She had used an app that basically allowed texts to later be scheduled so she could be in the room when the texts were showing up. She was also using a disguise for her IP address, and it was believed from the very beginning those texts from Cari asking to even move in with Dave, shortly after he left for work, were not her own words, because she didn't want to do that, and that it was actually Liz texting for her. And she even used a voice-changing app to call Nancy and pretend to be Dave at one point. They believed that Cari had been killed right before she was headed to work, that she had left Dave's apartment where Liz knew where she was, and was killed immediately after. But they needed evidence of murder. So in 2016, investigators obtained search warrants for her home she was staying in at the time, because she had moved, as well as Todd's home where she was during all of this happening. Inside her home, they found multiple cell phones, a video camcorder, a digital camera, and memory cards. They also found a black and white floral shower curtain. If you remember, that's the exact same one that Cari was said to have bought after she vanished using her credit cards. And when they found all of this technology, they actually realized that they matched manuals that Cari had for these items. Cari had a receipt for, this camcorder, and she also had the manual for it, but she did not have it in her home. Liz did. Then Dave began to help them to catch a killer, because he had found a tablet that the police had not yet found, and he said that Liz would often use it when he was over, when the two were dating, and there was still actually a memory card inside. Once the forensic digital examiner was given this, he was disappointed because there was nothing on it. However, unlike the phone evidence, he could uncover the deleted files, and that's when he found 13,000 photos and many texts that were not seen before. Now, he quickly realized that some of the photos were actually the same photos they had downloaded from Liz's phone. This memory card had once been in Liz's phone, and some very strange photos were uncovered, such as a blue and gray tarp and something flesh covered with a yin-yang tattoo. Pathologists believed that flesh thing in the photo was a human's left foot that was in stages of decomposition. So with this, they finally had the evidence they needed, and Liz Goyer, who was allegedly a victim of stalking, was officially arrested and charged with her murder on December 22nd of 2016. It was theorized that Liz killed Cari because she was getting in the way of her relationship with Dave, and that she let her body decompose before burning her remains. The impersonation of Cari was said not to be just because she was trying to cover up her disappearance, but also because every time something happened within the harassment from Cari, Dave and Liz rekindled their romance because it was so rocky, so on again, off again. And every single time they got back together. Then it was believed that when she felt like she was going to get caught, she brought Amy Flora into the picture and tried to blame it on her. She was going to blame her for the murder and get her out of Dave's life all in one. But this would also mean that Liz would have shot herself in the parking lot that day. So let's dive into a little bit about who Shayna Liz Goyer is. So she was born on June 28th of 1975 and was in the foster care system since the age of 2 years old. Her biological father was an alcoholic and abused her mother, and not long after this, her mother actually kicked him out of the house, and so her and her brother George were allowed to go back into the home. But shortly after, she was hit by a car and killed, and so they were sent back to foster care for the remainder, of their childhood, and Liz ended up being adopted by the Goyer family. She did say that one of her foster parents, before she was adopted, had abused her. Now, growing up, she was said to be extremely manipulative with her relationships, her friendships, her family. She would then go on to have her son. But this son was dropped and tragically died the next day. She had called her boyfriend, who was not actually the father of the child, but just the boyfriend she was living with, and told him that she had accidentally dropped the baby. And the next day, she was dealing with the death of her son. His cause of death was listed as shaken baby syndrome, and that somebody had shook him very hard for at least 20 seconds. Now, Liz's boyfriend Glenn was questioned, and he said, sometimes I'll throw the baby up in the air just because he giggles when I do that. Could that have been why? He was upset. He was wondering. He kind of had this guilt about him, and they ended up arresting him for the death of this baby, even though Liz had admitted to dropping the baby the day prior. And even though she had a criminal record for car theft and had a warrant for her arrest at this time. She was said by friends and family to appear happy at her baby's funeral, and she then testified at Glenn's trial under a disguise, saying that she believed Glenn's mother, whom they also lived with, actually killed the baby. But Glenn then pled guilty after Liz had read letters that Glenn had allegedly written to her from prison, saying that Liz had nothing to do with it, that he had killed the baby. However, it was found that Glenn had a mental disability and could not even write those full sentences. He was still found guilty. And with her next boyfriend and the father of her next 2 children, he broke up with her because she was controlling. This boyfriend of hers, or this ex-boyfriend, when he started trying to date somebody else, Liz started harassing her. Her name was Melissa, and Melissa was sent photos, old photos of Liz with her boyfriend doing sexual acts because Liz was trying to get her to think that her boyfriend was cheating on her. But the strangest part was that Liz began to morph herself into Melissa. She got the same car, the same job, the same hair. She was asking people to call her Melissa. And after the news of Cari's murder came out and Liz's involvement, that girl, Melissa, that had been dealing with Liz for all those years prior, suddenly realized a time when Liz had made her cookies. And it was specifically to her. And she got this really eerie feeling as she didn't eat them. And now she believes that Liz was trying to kill her by poisoning her with those cookies. Now, with all of this, with the background of Liz Golier and knowing more about her, I do feel the need to point out there is something we cannot ignore. When attachment is broken at such a young age, attachment is one of the most important things in kids, and it creates emotion. It creates empathy. And when it is taken away or stripped away, especially multiple times over and over again through the foster system, it is detrimental. And the foster system does not want to acknowledge that it is doing this to children or the side effects of what occurs afterwards. In most cases, the ripping of attachment, the abuse and negligence that they go through is not the children's fault, but their further actions affect many, and it needs to be further studied. Something needs to be done. We can't just not acknowledge what is happening. Now, it was not believed that Dave had anything to do with this or knew anything about it. However, he was most likely the motive here. Now, Dave was said to fully cooperate since the beginning of the investigation. He said that he and Liz had been on and off, but had officially actually broken up in 2015. So a year after she was arrested, she was officially convicted. She pled not guilty. She didn't have a jury trial. She just wanted the judge to make the decision, even though she was advised against that. But her defense didn't even present any evidence. They simply said that without a recovered body, there was not enough proof, and that the only evidence that they had was of harassment, not murder. Dave Krupa then testified against Liz, saying he once witnessed Liz during this time crawling on the ground between his apartment and parked cars. He had no idea why, he just kind of let it go. And he said that, this whole time he wasn't actually that interested in Liz, which made her so obsessed with him and very clingy. He said she was not very intelligent and that he did not want to really be with her, but they kept getting back together because she would beg him. He said that anytime he would be with any other girl, she would go crazy.
I'll kill her. She stole my heart. She broke my dream. She stole my future when she took you away from me. That will die.
And he would later learn that even though they had spoken about being in an open relationship, he was saying, date other people. She had actually deleted her dating profile almost immediately after meeting Dave and did not want to see anybody else. However, she was living with her boyfriend at the time, Todd, but that just wasn't doing it for her, I guess. He also said that every time he would go and visit his kids with Amy, she would accuse him of basically just going to sleep with Amy and that it wasn't even about the kids. She would then wrote him a persuasive email saying, I want to be just you and me. I want to be exclusive. And so Dave ended up agreeing to do so for a month. During this month is actually when he first met Cari, and as soon as it was over, he asked Cari out on a date. At the end of Dave's statement, he said that he wanted Liz to go away and never to do this to anyone else.
Did you ever hear Cari Farver's voice?
Negative.
Did you ever see her in person?
Negative.
So all the times you went looking for her around your apartment building and had everybody else looking for her, you never actually saw her?
If I had, this would have been over a long time ago.
Now, one of Liz's other boyfriends, Todd, the man she lived with at the time, testified to smelling something burning during the time that Cari disappeared, but had no idea what it was. Now, after 9 days of a trial, Judge Timothy Burns quickly convicted her of first-degree murder as well as second-degree arson and sentenced her to life in prison plus 18 to 20 years. He said there was an overwhelming amount of evidence presented by the state. He said, Cari Farver did not voluntarily disappear and drop off the face of the earth. Very sadly, she was murdered. Liz was then sent to the Nebraska Correctional Center for Women, showing zero emotion. Liz's attorney even said that he was impressed with the prosecution's case, even though they had no body to work with. He said he'd also gotten threatening emails from people threatening Liz's children, but most believe that these were actually sent from a contraband phone from Liz in jail.
Prosecutors say she has no heart and shows zero remorse.
She was making up excuses for what she did, trying to implicate friends of hers that helped her write the emails. There were no friends. She doesn't have many friends that ever came out in this investigation, and certainly she could have mentioned names if she wanted to during the whole trial, and she didn't.
Now, Cari's family were in tears at this trial. They were relieved that she didn't just leave, that they now knew that there was a reason she had just vanished. She didn't just leave them behind, and they were very thankful to investigators who kept working for answers. However, they still don't have Cari's remains to put to rest.
And I'm so thankful that she can't hurt anybody else. She's terrorized too many people. She's got a life sentence now, but she also gave everybody else that loved Cari a life sentence. She took Cari's life. She gave my grandson a life sentence of not having his mother there. And all of the people that love her, we have to live with the nightmare that we have lived with for so long.
And something I didn't tell you was that after Cari's father died, her mother actually had a dream of her father, or her husband, coming to her and saying, you know, Cari's here with me. And from that point on, she believed that her daughter was already dead. Cari was said to be this extremely intelligent spark of light, a kind, compassionate woman whose mental health was used against her and allowed her to be painted as a monster, when in fact she was a victim. Now, we didn't speak much on her past at first, which you know that I love to do because the victims are the most important thing to me here, but this is how I wanted to tell the case because I wanted you to realize how false narratives can become reality for people who don't seek the truth. You were led to believe in the beginning that it was Cari harassing these people because that's the narrative that I gave you, that most people in this case thought and were told, when that was not true until it was further dug into. And so I think it's very important to realize how quickly that can happen. But Cari Lee Farver was born on November 30th of 1874 to Nancy and Dennis, and she had an older brother named Adam and a half younger brother whose wedding she missed named John. Now, they had all grown up in the same place that she would later be living on her own. Now, her parents actually did divorce when she was quite young, but Cari was raised by her mother and her stepfather, Mark, and she was very close to her father, Dennis, as well. From a very young age, Cari was in this gifted program for highly intelligent children, and when she wasn't at school, she loved being in plays and musicals, and after high school she actually went to the University of Kansas where she met the future father of her son, and this was a man named Frank. Now, being pregnant did not actually stop her studies though. She was studying online while raising a newborn on her own, but it wasn't long after that that Cari's mother began to see that she was very depressed and it was a low in her mental health. And like I told you, she was later diagnosed with bipolar. But Cari actually did not believe this diagnosis. She did not think that this was right for her. And she said that there was never any mania, only anxiety and depression. She ended up moving from Kansas back to her hometown to raise Max, and that's where this story truly began. But her story quickly fizzled due to the wrath of a jealous woman. Now, Liz did appeal to the Nebraska Supreme Court, claiming that the evidence was insufficient due to no body. This was denied, and an inmate inside with Liz claimed that she's insane and asked to be called Cari. Now, the digital forensics administrator, who's named Anthony Cava, has actually been working with Facebook to get rid of all of the fake profiles that Liz had put up. Because not only was she pretending to be Amy and Cari, she also set up a whole bunch of different profiles just to spy on Cari's family. And Anthony said that leaving them up is basically just a reminder to Cari's family that something is still out there and remnants of a crime that took place. For a bit, Dave did do some interviews. He said he was trying to get Cari's story out there, but now he does not have social media. He does not want any attention. He is believed to be a self-employed business entrepreneur, but that is all that is known today. Cari's son, though, lost his mother in the blink of an eye and was coerced into believing for years that she would return to him. He ended up being raised by his grandmother and was believed to have graduated from Iowa State University with a degree in software engineering and has a successful job in that today, which is not too different than his mother. And he is also believed to be happily married to a childhood sweetheart. Do you think that Liz killed before? Do you believe that she killed her own baby and let her boyfriend go to prison for it? How do you think that this impersonation and defamation of Cari's character occurred for so long? The scary part to me is that the stigma of Cari being bipolar could have made Liz get away with murder. Everyone, including her family at first, believed that this could have been just a manic episode. And I think it was easier to believe that and that she would return than to believe that she had been murdered. But I think Cari was actually killed twice in this case. Once physically, when she was actually brutally murdered, and the other when everyone around her was led to believe that she was this horrible person. It's truly heartbreaking, and I'm very happy that the truth came out and I am able to tell you about the real Cari, the beautiful, strong mother, daughter, and human. Do you think Dave had anything to do with this? I've seen some theories that, maybe he knew more than he let on. Did Amy? How in the world could this woman set her own house on fire, killing her pets, shooting herself in the leg? It really just shows that lack of empathy. Something in the brain that is broken or isn't connecting correctly. And Cari was not the jealous type. She, in fact, was more than willing to do exactly what Dave wanted and just, let's have this be casual. It's not like she was fighting at all with Liz. She just wanted to be with Dave occasionally. And I think probably what set Liz off was the fact that she was staying over so many nights for the project, and Liz was probably worried, she's moving in. But to Cari, that was just really to help with her work and to be closer than anything else. It had nothing to do with Dave. So let me know what you think about this ODDtober video. Remember, I'm posting so much this month, so make sure that you are coming back to my channel to come and see what I have in store for you. And if you want merch, I will have that linked down below. So don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.